Good afternoon or early evening, everyone. Good afternoon or welcome early to evening, everyone. ControlBooth hosted session entitled Hitting the Go Button on Your Entertainment Industry Career. I am your moderator, Ethan Gilson, with Entertainment Rigging Sessions, and you can see over my shoulder, I also host a podcast about entertainment rigging. We have a great panel assembled today to talk about, as we said in our description, some different aspects of the business side of the entertainment industry, and how to kind of work your way through entering the industry. So I'm going to start by having our panelists introduce themselves, and we're going to start with David.
Hi, I'm David Silvernail, and I run ControlBooth.com. I also work for Production Advantage / Vincent Lighting Systems, and happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Mike Nikolai with TLC Engineering Solutions, based out of Florida. I'm a venues and acoustics consultant. Do some architectural consulting, some systems consulting, and I have a background both in theater production as well as in audiovisual systems integration.
Hi, I'm Molly Brindley. I'm currently the moving light programmer for Seattle Opera, as well as being freelance. I've also worked in circus, lighting manufacturing, and various other aspects of entertainment, mostly in lighting.
My name is Lainey Marks, and I'm a high school theater teacher at Stonebridge High School in Ashburn, Virginia.
And I'm Kevin McCoy. I use he/him pronouns, and I've been on tour for about 18 years, and I'm doing mostly audio. And most recently, I've been the head audio for the And Peggy Company of Hamilton.
Excellent. Well, first, I want to thank you, the five of you, for being here today to be on this panel. It's appreciated. So this session, really, in the description, we talked about getting some information to those who are entering the industry and haven't really necessarily had the opportunity to get some information about how you deal with this industry as a business. So I'm going to ask a question to the panelists to start off, which is kind of the core of what a lot of business discussion in the arts is, which is, why is there a perception that if you are in this industry, you have to portray that role of the starving artist? Any one of you can start.
Well, when we started discussing this, one of the things that came up is because other aspects of this industry have the starving in a garret sort of vibe to it, I think that the extension of that into the technical aspects has become a theme, but not an accurate one. I think most of us have done this for a living for quite a long time and been able to keep a roof over our heads up until at least the current crisis. So I think it's sort of by association rather than by reality.
And a lot of us, got into this because it's something we're passionate about, we enjoy doing, and a lot of the ways that you get into doing it professionally go through doing it, as something that's maybe it starts as a hobby, maybe it's something you do at school, maybe it's something you do community theater level, and at all of those levels, there is that implication of, we can only pay you so much, or maybe we can't pay you. This is just an opportunity for you to learn. That doesn't get a good reset button pressed on it when you do start doing this professionally. And a lot of the people who I've talked to across the industry, many of them are trained as artists and practitioners of theater. They do not have formal business training. Almost everyone has picked it up as they've gone.
It's something that as a teacher, our parents are often really concerned about. In high school, It's really fun to be in the theater department, and then the kids start talking about, maybe I want to study this in college, maybe I want to do this for a career. And the parents, they get anxious about that because of the tropes that exist of being the starving artist. So a lot of it is about educating the students and the parents that that doesn't have to be the life that you live when you work in this industry.
And to some extent, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's something that we definitely need to work against. That it might be easy when you're earlier in your career to take a job that pays less than it should, pays less than you're worth, because that's, you know, that's what theater jobs are. They don't pay enough, and it's definitely a trope that we need to fight against for sure.
I forgot to mention at the beginning of this for our attendees. In the YouTube feed, there is a chat function on usually the right-hand side of the video, and we will be taking questions. Our plan is to talk for about 45 minutes and then leave questions for the end. But if there are some really good ones, maybe I'll throw them in as we go. And this is scheduled for an hour. We're certainly in no rush. If you want to stick around afterwards, we'll probably answer more questions after. So I just wanted to lay that out. Speaking of, I'm going to wait on some of those questions. So how have each of you, as you were getting into the industry, how did you find that balance between quantity of hours that you were working, whereas when you're starting out and your pay rate may have not been as high and you worked more hours so that you could make more money, versus becoming confident to look for quality hours that maybe you were getting a slightly higher rate and being having more value to your time? If that was a question.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, you know, when I worked the most hours was probably when I was in college, and then shortly thereafter, because I was doing multiple things at once, and it was important to me in my education that I was going out and, you know, doing an internship with ETC, doing an internship with an AV integrator. You know, I did some freelance design. I did some work with some local high schools, and the more of that I did, you know, the quality of how I felt about the work improved. But I was definitely stretched very thin for a few years there. And I've since been able to sort of curtail that back now that I've gotten more into the consulting side of things. But every project that I approach, I look at it from the perspective of, is this the kind of project that I want to be working on, that I'm passionate about? And if it's not, then it's, you know, that's a good opportunity to find somebody who's a better fit for that.
It's also worth, when you're early career, sort of looking at the value added things that can happen for jobs that are maybe not paying as the greatest. You know, I certainly don't encourage anyone to take jobs that don't pay anything or jobs that are exploitative. But when you're starting out, sometimes you have to take the jobs that are available to you, and looking at the value that can be added through networking. Networking is so critical to everything that we do. And I mean, even thinking back to the beginning of my career, I started as a freelance stage technician in Minneapolis. And certainly the first jobs I was just taking any job that was offered to me that paid above minimum wage to run shows, because I was meeting people that could get me the better jobs and get me into the position where I could choose the jobs I wanted to take. But the first while was just taking whatever jobs I could for the networking, and also because I needed to pay bills.
Yeah, I would, following on with what Kevin is saying, and Mike as well, you know, you kind of take everything as it shows up, and as you, it's sort of like sample everything on the buffet. Make sure you're getting a good meal, but to belabor that metaphor, but you know, try a bunch of different things, and you'll start to see, like, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. This was fun, even though I didn't get paid a lot, so I would think about doing it again. I think we as technicians have a tendency to say yes to everything as much as we can. And sort of learning to say no is a little bit of an art form. But yeah, I would say, take all the gigs that I mean, make sure you get sleep and are safe, but take all the gigs, see what you like, see what you don't, and see what presents itself. Somebody said the other day about having your head on a swivel to sort of look for what your opportunities are. And that ability to like, oh, what's that gig about?
Yeah, and to follow up on point that Kevin made about exploitation, don't feel like you have to take on work that you're uncomfortable working on. A lot of the work that I did early on that was actual professional work I was getting paid for in high school was I started doing overhire work at the local roadhouses. And of course, we did the thing where you do the one-man genie lift and then you stand on the rungs and reach up and you're not tethered to anything. And it's like, that's just the expectation. And when you're in high school, you neither have the world experience or the comfort in expressing how unsafe that is. And it's important to realize as early as you possibly can that you should not put yourself in situations where you may be taken advantage of, either from a safety perspective or from a financial perspective. The places that take advantage of you one way are going to probably do it other ways. That same roadhouse also would do things with overtime hours, where they'd shift hours into other weeks so that you weren't paid time and a half. And one of the things that the dialogues that I want us to be starting to open up across the industry is being more transparent about where we're seeing those things and confronting them, so that we can build up everyone in our community, that we can weed out those venues and organizations that are going to try and take advantage of people.
And just for the clarity of maybe younger people who are watching, those sorts of practices, especially what Mike was saying about moving overtime hours, isn't just like bad company being mean to employees. It's illegal. So it's something that you'll have the backing of the government organizations if you report it. So just be aware.
So there's a question that was just asked. Actually, a series of 3 questions. So I'm going to look for fast responses on the first 2 questions, and I'm going to get to the third one. So the first one was, how many of you are still working right now? So I'll raise my hand. I'm still working in a capacity. The follow-up to that was, were any of you laid off for any amount of time? So yeah, I'm different. I own my own business, but certainly there was a period where I wasn't doing anything. So I think that's fairly normal for everyone in our industry. And then the last question, which is kind of related to those, was related to the industry being a gig economy, where there are a lot of people who choose to be a freelancer or an independent contractor from a legal standpoint, and now have found that because of the gig economy and we're not working, certain things that might be available to employees, e.g. unemployment, are not available to them because they were independent contractors. How do you think, coming out of the pandemic, do you think that this experience will change people's mindsets or enable people in our industry to maybe recognize that they should be classified properly to make sure they're protected moving forward?
I think it's really important that people understand that, if you look at the IRS criteria of what it entails being either a 1099 independent contractor or being an employee, it's pretty clear that, in almost all capacities in our industry, most people who are being called independent contractors are not meeting that criteria. That is something that definitely makes it easier for them to be, again, taken advantage of. And also, it puts a lot of business responsibility on people who may not have experience or understanding of that. I know a few friends fresh out of college who were unaware of the tax implications. They thought by getting, checks directly for a lump sum that they were getting a better deal because it wasn't getting taxed. They didn't realize that they had to report that to the IRS and that they were still going to have to pay tax, and that in some cases it was going to be more than what they would have paid if they were an employee. And that is something you do not want to be surprised with when tax filing day comes around.
And I think one of the things that we have to do, obviously, high school is not vocational training necessarily. You can go to vocational school, but our jobs involve more than teaching kids how to do taxes. But I don't think it would be a bad thing for us to have these kinds of discussions with our students who are very seriously considering entering the entertainment industry. When I was in high school, I went to a conference, thespian conference, and I went to a class that was on the business of theater. I was a senior. Nobody had ever talked to me about this before. And I didn't know what a 1099 was or a W-2 or any of that stuff. And so I think having honest conversations with students, and also for people that are in the industry, one thing that I have really enjoyed hearing from the panel as we've talked before this is how you all reach out to younger people or people who are just entering this career to help them and help explain these things, because a lot of this is based on, um, you know, getting help from people who've been there before. So I love it that people are looking out, and we should continue to do that.
And one of the things you're pointing out with how different phases of this industry have weathered the pandemic is how different situations have supported them. Some people were able to keep working or draw on other resources. Some people had access to unemployment. Some people had support from local industries such as their unions, and seeing what served them and what worked. So I think it'll be very interesting to sort of put heads together and see how it helped, and where things were supportive and where things were less supportive, and being able to make choices from that based on the information we can gather. That would be an interesting project.
I've heard from a lot of people in the ControlBooth community, and some were union members, and they have been supported all the way through. And some have even had cases where their UI benefits they've exhausted them in some cases. And so I think there's a number of different options. Some people have insurance through their significant other. There's a number of unique situations for everybody, and it really takes an honest look. I think this is really forcing us to confront the situation head on, that may not always be gigs available all the time. And gig work is still a really important part of the economy, and how we do things, overhire, locals, the way it's all set up right now. Now, does that change? Is this really going to change the conversation? I certainly hope so. I think that our industry will be much better served overall by having these difficult conversations, by setting the right expectations, both legally and morally. Um, and it's really important. It's a big reason we decided to have these talks, to put this out in the open and have these conversations. But the first part of that question I wanted to jump back to: how many of you still working right now? Were any of you laid off for any amount of time? I can tell myself I was down to um, a lower. I was down to like 3/4 and 2/3 of my normal hours for a significant portion of last year, and it's tough. Things get tight. Um, and I know some people have worked straight through. Liney being a teacher, that's definitely one benefit of being in the education field. It's a lot more stable. I know Molly, you have a number of different gigs, and Kevin, I know you had quite a bit of time off.
Yeah, I did my last show on March 11th, and I haven't worked since.
So,
Yeah.
we've, part of assembling this panel was trying to make sure that we found a very diverse set of circumstances and experiences and perspectives, and so that's a big part of the makeup of this panel, is that we all have had very different experiences across the board.
And I've, just a follow up to the third part of that question, I have 3 sort of quick action points for anyone watching. The first is, I'm fearful that when we go back, I'm hopeful that when we go back, things will change. I'm fearful that people will be eager to take any jobs that come about. So one of the things that I would hope people do is, when you're in that part of the interview, when they ask you, do you have any questions for me? Ask the company what they did for their people during the pandemic, how they handled the pandemic. And if you have access to people who work there, ask those people, how did this company treat their people during the pandemic? Because that'll be a big way to help you understand the culture of that company. And then number 2, just for people who are watching this who may not quite get what we're talking about with classification and stuff, basically, if you don't know that you're a 1099 employee, you're probably not. And so you're probably being exploited if a company's paying you by a 1099. As opposed to a W-2, all of this, of course, being in the US. There's similar equivalents in Canada. And then the third quick point I want to just make is that it's possible to be a freelancer and not be on a 1099. Some people, the terms get conflated a lot. I was a freelancer during my time in Minneapolis. I worked for a bunch of different theater companies, but they were all W-2 jobs. You can have a bunch of different part-time jobs or short-term jobs that pay W-2. So you don't have to be misclassified to be a freelancer, just to make sure that's clear for everyone.
So each state is obviously different, and they'll have different specifics about the situation, but there are some common things, and as well as federally. And those things are, the default state is that you're an employee. And it is actually, in most states, the employer's responsibility to prove that you were not an employee. And I'm going to tie this into one of the questions, is what would I tell a student who is looking to perceive this or to pursue a career in the entertainment industry? Get a good accountant who can help guide you through things and will help you make the most of what money you are making. And they will know the laws. And another thing is that I forgot what it was going to be. So, hey, don't get old. The brain stops working.
Save.
Yeah, save.
Can I just follow that real quick, Ethan, with just a quick comment about taxes that surprised me when I started touring. For any of you who are interested in touring, when you work in multiple states, you get taxes withheld and tax returns in multiple states. So I've had years when I've had 25 different state tax returns. That is definitely a great time to hire a professional entertainment accountant to do. So just something to watch out for as you're entering the industry. If you're going into touring, that's something that can surprise you at tax time. So just talk to people who've been on the road for a while, and they'll help you find the right accountants who can help you with that stuff.
I remember what I was going to say, which is we're seeing a trend with different federal organizations besides the IRS. OSHA, for instance, is determining who the employer-employee is, not based on who is paying, but who's controlling the work. And that is the number one thing that either the IRS, a state, or OSHA is going to look at. Who is controlling the work? So I often try to create an example of people who would be true independent contractors in our business. Maybe a designer who's hired to design a show. Here's our first rehearsal. And you determine how much time it's going to take to design the set, how many meetings you got to go to figure it out. You're not being paid by the hour. It's a flat fee. You probably an independent contractor. In most states, if you're hired and you're paid by the hour, you're an employee. If you're being told what time to show up, what time you're taking lunch, and what time the work is done, you're probably an employee. And what I was going to say before was, it's not up to you to decide if you're an employee or an independent contractor. That is a legal threshold. The question for you as an individual is, do you meet the threshold to be an employee, which is the default, or are you an independent contractor? And what Kevin was saying was important. It is a matter of what protections you have, and not necessarily are you in control of your schedule. The term we tend to use is a sporadic employee. So a lot of companies that have 500 or 600 people as a labor force, or maybe that's a large number, those are sporadic employees. They're not part-time. Maybe they are. They're certainly not full-time, but they're employees. So, gonna move us on. One of the questions that, again, I think is important for people new to the industry is, how do you figure out the value of your time? How do you make sure that you're not just taking the job because they offered a rate and you want to work it all, but also not overvaluing the time? What are there resources to help you figure out, hey, it's my first job. The guy wants to pay me minimum wage. Is that enough? Should it be more for what I'm doing? How do you figure that out?
Ask a buddy. There are, some people are uncomfortable talking about money. There are plenty of people who are willing to talk about it if the question is asked. And certainly, the entertainment industry is we're pretty tight knit. I personally have found that one of the best resources that I've had has been, there's this the ControlBooth forums. There's some different subreddits. There's Facebook groups. There's a bunch of clusters of professional communications that our industry has, where even if you don't know who to ask the question to, you can pose a question and 15, 20 people will respond with their experiences. In my world of architectural consulting, a lot of what I do is, or a lot of how I started figuring out how do we value our time, how do I value my time as an employee, and how do I determine how much I'm charging a client for a project. A lot of that is based off of looking around and seeing what are other people doing, and that leads to the next step, which is you propose how much you want to get paid, and then you have to defend it. And it's the process of negotiation that makes that fair. And you should go into any compensation situation prepared to negotiate. Don't take the first thing that's on the table. Don't feel like you have to start with the other person's bargaining position. If you walk into it and somebody's like, how much do you want to get paid? I want to get paid, $20 to $30 an hour. Okay, $20 an hour. You've just set the bar lower. And there are going to be situations where maybe it's too high and somebody's like, all right, that's great. Or sorry, we can't make this work. But a lot of the times, people are willing to negotiate, and if it's too high, then you can talk about it, and you can negotiate both on compensation and on benefits.
And for those of us who are in a line of work where you don't have negotiation power over your really anything, and a lot of people don't, and it's not just the education world. A lot of theater companies, operas, etc., have salary scales, have hourly rates that they stick to. So if that is not something that you're able to negotiate, then you do still need to consider negotiation a little bit, because you have a job description and you have things that fall within that job description and you have things that are not part of that job description. And so obviously we're Americans and we like to work hard, and we, that's kind of our society is putting in the most work possible. And that's can be a great mentality, and that can also be really toxic. So figuring out if you are not in a position to negotiate your actual benefits and your actual pay, not becoming the person that's constantly working extra hours doing things that are not part of your job is important.
Yeah, and some of it is, sometimes you'll get into a job and you'll take a job and then decide, whether it's a full-time job or a job that was a one-off or whatever, but use that information going forward, because it may not be what you thought it was, either because things changed or for a variety of reasons. But you may get into something and be like, you know what, this is not worth my time. And you can either decide to renegotiate, or you can finish that gig and then use that information going forward. And some of it does come down to, look at the math, look at how much time are you spending getting there? How much extra stress is it causing you? How much does it make you happy? And as well as, checking in with others and seeing like, okay, I can't negotiate this because it's a contracted rate and everybody gets paid the same. Okay, now we know that. But as was said, like, okay, what's in the job description? Maybe they're asking too much.
So a great question came in related to this, which is, when negotiating a rate, are there other expenses to consider besides self-employment tax as a contractor and insurance?
Sometimes, I mean, I've had jobs that included meals, transportation. It sort of depends, we in prior run-up to this, we were talking about things that we've negotiated for. At one point I negotiated for a new chair because the chair was very sad at the console. All of the things that you can negotiate for. Financially, it depends. I've also negotiated for vacation time. But that's not as nuts and bolts as I think the person is asking.
There's expenses to consider. I mean, you have to consider your travel time, how much you're spending to get to and from, and that needs to be a factor. I worked a job that looked great on paper, but I was spending an hour and a half in the car every day, and that ate up far more than I had calculated and anticipated, and both money and mental stress, because driving around Washington, D.C. is just not fun. It's bad. There was a follow-up question about liability insurance you want to carry as an independent contractor. If we could touch on that, because I think a couple of us can probably speak to that.
If no one else wants to, I certainly will, but...
You were who I was thinking of, Ethan.
All right. So I'm one of those people, as a newer business owner, I started my company back in 2018. I learned a lot. You take a crash course on different things. In a lot of states, if you're an independent contractor, you should be carrying liability insurance, meaning if you are working for a lighting company, you're an independent contractor, and you drop a light, their insurance may cover it, but the first thing they're going to do, their insurance company is going to look at you as an independent contractor and see if you have insurance, because they don't want to pay out the claim. Workers' comp can be a very complicated situation because it's all state run. It depends on the state, but you potentially could have the same issue. Are you covered by the vendor's workers' comp policy? And it can make it a very complicated situation. And that is probably the number one detractor to people from forming a business, to try to create some separation between themselves and the business they're running. So forming an LLC is a very, very easy thing to do. In most states, it's not that expensive and can help you create some separation between you as an individual and you as a professional. My recommendation is, if you really want to learn about that side of the business, There are great resources out there. There's different message boards. See if your local community college has some simple business classes, because that's also going to help you with accounting, things you can write off. Your mileage, you can write off every time you go to a job that's beyond a normal commute. You write that mileage off. That comes off of your earnings, to say, and you're not taxed on it. There are a lot of things you can do to help maximize that side of it. I'll tell you, liability insurance is not cheap. And the more money you make, the more expensive it gets, because they say, hey, your exposure is greater because you're either working more or you're doing higher profile jobs, to use that term. And so your risk of having an incident is greater. And now I'm going to read some questions that came in.
While you're reading the question, I was going to plug in one thing with the accounting. Even if, this whole idea of hiring an accountant, you're a beginning, technical person, and like, I don't want to have to hire an accountant just to take some jobs at the arena and see if I like doing the stagecraft stuff. I would say that even when I first started, before we were all carrying around computers, I would keep a log in my calendar of, I worked this day, I earned this much money, and here's when I expect to get paid. So keeping a running log of what your accounting was. And that's been super useful in several ways, to say like, oh, how much money did I make that year? How much money did I make this year? Who did I work for? So if you're just starting out, even just keeping a spreadsheet can be incredibly useful and a simple way to track your expenses and how much money you're making.
Absolutely. So this question came in, which I think is a great question. So I'm going to pose it. How do you ensure diversity and inclusion in our industry for those starting out who may not be privileged enough to afford to accept those lower paying gigs / internships or training resources?
Yeah, definitely. One of the first things to answer that is that for everyone who is privileged enough to take those, don't take those, because you're making it harder for everyone else. That's the answer for everyone else. It's definitely a harder answer for the people who are in that position. And one thing that I can recommend is looking for resources and people who can help you, who are interested in equity and diversity and inclusion, who can help you make the connections you need. Because like I said earlier, so much of the industry is about networking, and often the benefit of taking those unfair jobs to the people who are privileged to take them is the networking opportunities they get. And if you can sidestep that process by connecting with people who will help you network otherwise, that's a way to sort of short circuit that privilege feedback loop. And as Mike was saying earlier, there's a lot of places to connect with people like that. I know, there's ControlBooth, of course, and many of us are active in a lot of other places. So you just have to, if you can find the people where they are, will help you. I will definitely help you. Contact me in any of the places, and I will help you in everywhere I can.
And also making sure that people know that the opportunities are out there. I mean, like, hey, there's classes being offered on this that cost the same, like our particular local offers classes, and they don't cost very much, and we all pay into the system and fine. But saying, hey, we have some classes that are going to be happening about this. Do you want to take them? Are you aware of this? Like spreading the information around and making sure that everyone knows that the opportunities are there, so that people can get lifted up.
I'll take the opportunity to throw a plug in for somebody who's not affiliated with this discussion or anything. But in Boston, there's a group called Brighter Boston, which was started a few years ago by a gentleman named Dan Jensen, a friend of mine. And really, their goal is to tackle one of the challenges, which is urban communities that don't have the resources to provide students a performing arts opportunity, and to create that opportunity so that they have a chance to be exposed to it. And that's really the challenge of changing our diversity of people coming into the industry is creating opportunities for those who may not have it to be exposed to performing arts and find out if they like it and find out if they have a passion and then allow them to follow that. So what I would say is reach out to Brighter Boston and say, how did you do this? And maybe start an organization like that in your community and get other people involved who are with you in trying to change the culture, because it's a very complicated situation, especially when you're talking about schools and budgets. So instead of trying to attack it that way and trying to change that, just what can we do, simple things we can do to create opportunities for potential students to be involved with different things. And there are lots of avenues to do that.
And always keep an eye out for, non-traditional career paths or internships or opportunities. There are a lot of manufacturers and such in our industry that will pay to, bring you in from out of state, and will give you housing during an internship for, a summer or winter at a time. And the hard part is just being aware that, there are those opportunities that may not be, in your backyard, but that are an option. And, the best thing to do is, reach out to some of those companies. And even if, some of them like ETC are, they have a very thorough website that you can go to and you can see what's going on. But, in general, across our industry, feel free to pick up a phone and call. A lot of people are very accessible. So just always be mindful that, working in a theater, in front of a console is not the only career path that you have available for getting experience. And also, just over the period of the last, 9 months, there are a ton of online resources now. A lot of manufacturers have started putting training online for, here's how you tune sound systems, here's how you program these consoles. There are a ton of resources. Also, the Facebook groups are great too. You could be part of the EOS programmers Facebook group, and you can see, 15, 20 people on any given day debate how they do magic sheets for their consoles. It's obviously not the same as, direct hands-on experience, but, you keep your eyes open for all of those different avenues of being able to become engaged with others in the industry, and then know that you can reach out to them and say, hey, are you aware of something? Here's kind of what I'm interested in. What do you think? Because a lot of people in the industry have been in different positions. They've gone across the country, and if they rack their brains a little bit, they can usually come up with something that'll be a good fit.
I will say one of my big personal missions is helping as many people understand there are so many other roles in this industry aside from being directly involved in a production. I'm in retail and e-commerce sales. I sell all the lighting and gear and gaff tape and expendables and all that stuff. So I don't directly involve myself in productions, but I work with people across the country who do as my customers. Getting to a trade show and finding what cool things to bring home to present to them. So there's so many more things, not just in retail, but manufacturing. You may not work, with the latest greatest lights, but you may help get to design the next generation. We've got people on ControlBooth, one who's getting his doctorate in color science. He's forgotten more about lights and color than I'll ever know. But there's so many opportunities on the hard sciences side, on the marketing and business side of the industry. It takes a whole village to put on a production, and it's not just on the hard technical side or the performance side. There's so many other roles and pieces where you can stay involved in the industry you love in different ways. So that's a really important point that I want to get across with everyone I meet.
This kind of ties into what our talk scheduled for tomorrow is about, though, which is the different branches that you can go off in the industry. But there's a lot of stuff like I'm in sort of the systems consulting world, and I do a lot of theater stuff. I also do some sports stuff. Also do some corporate stuff. Also do some education. Just by the nature of the company that I'm with, we've got a wide reach of projects that all have a very similar design process to working in theater. Client's got a problem that you are uniquely qualified to guide them through and provide expertise with, and help them navigate. And whether it's working on a high school theater over there, or if it's coming up with a game development studio or something, there are a lot of opportunities where the kinds of things that excite you about theater could excite you about something else. And theme parks, I think, are another one that tend to get overlooked that we can talk a little bit about tomorrow. But there are a lot of opportunities that are just like one sidestep away from being directly in theater, that are your skill sets are going to have a lot of overlap with.
So I'm totally gonna fanboy one of our panelists. We got a comment, Kevin, that said, "Oh my God, I totally just recognized you from the interview with Adam Savage." So yes, for those of you watching who have not figured it out, Kevin was a guest of Adam's YouTube show talking about, it was a series, 4 episodes talking about Hamilton while they were in San Francisco and the different jobs around. And so Kevin got to speak about engineering the performances. So certainly check that out. A question that came in earlier, which is kind of related, but I think is an important one, so I'm going to ask it. How do you all in your everyday lives deal with the pressures and stress in our industry to prevent yourselves from burning out?
I am one of the people who really likes being freelance. I have one part-time job and then I have a lot of freelance. And part of the way I deal with burnout is that I can control my schedule within a lot more parameters than I could if I had a regular job. And so I have time to say, no, I'm gonna take these days off. I'm choosing to take this time off to go watch the Super Bowl with my dad, or I'm gonna go take a motorcycle ride for a week, or I really want to work this gig. And that flexibility is actually how I personally balance the stress. And knowing that I chose that, and it's not something that was inflicted on me, is also part of it. That's how I deal with it in the overall. As far as the day-to-day moments, I breathe. It's a show. It'll happen. It's okay. We'll get through, all those things that we say to ourselves. But in the overall, I think the way that our industry is structured is how I manage my stress, is that I get to take my own time.
Having a really good support community around you helps enormously. I talk with many of the people here on a daily basis. Not only do we have the ControlBooth forums, we also have a ControlBooth Discord server. I can tell you that has been a huge sanity check in the last couple months, dealing with both external and internal stresses. External, well, we all watched the inauguration this morning, so it's been a lot. And having people to talk with and that you can be honest with is hugely important. Finding your tribe, to use a buzzword, is very important, especially in this industry. Not just for your sanity, but also having someone who can help you with things, or having a group of people that can help you with questions like, am I being underpaid here, or am I being exploited? What should I ask for this? There are people with just there's a million unique experiences out there. So I strongly encourage you, whether it's a Reddit group, a Facebook group, Control Booth forums, a Discord server. There's a number of great ones out there. The Green Room is a really good one, aside from the Control Booth Discord, of course. But there's so many places where you can help find like-minded people because, frankly, what we do is a very unusual industry. I mean, we have crazy hours, we do crazy things, and a lot of other people just don't understand. They don't understand, or they've never experienced that rush of opening night, or when the curtain closes to tumultuous applause. Whether you're backstage or involved in any way, we derive joy from that. We love live entertainment, and that means that oftentimes our industry is a lot different than many others. And so, finding a tribe of people who get that is really, really important. And we'd love to have you.
Also, just sort of following what Molly was saying, but also tying in with the previous question, because there's so many different paths in this industry to different career opportunities, it really becomes a choose your own adventure sort of thing. And one of the great things is that I think it's pretty fair to say that most entertainment careers tend towards trend towards being better at your stress management, because you tend to find the jobs that you want as you're trying things and you're finding, oh, I didn't like that, next I'm not going to take jobs like that anymore, and you sort of work into the jobs that work for you. I work for I work on shows that last for years, hopefully, at a time, and that's something that some people hate. Some people just can't stand doing the same show over and over. That's terrible for their mental health. For me, I like it. I like being able to refine my performance in every show. But also, one of the great things about my specific part of the industry, and thanks for the kind plug there, Ethan, but mixing the show is really hard. And we have 8 shows a week, and mixing all 8 shows a week would be really hard. But fortunately, my colleague, Adriana, also mixes the show. So we trade off. And so finding jobs that allow you to manage your mental health in that way too are really great. And honestly, we can spell each other at a moment's notice. So if one of us isn't feeling like mixing tonight because we slept not great last night, or we're not feeling well, we can ask the other to mix. And finding places like that, finding jobs that can help you manage the stress just by the way the jobs are structured is a blessing. And I would encourage you to trend your career in that direction as much as possible. Find the jobs that work for you.
And another important part is, know when to walk away. When you go home at the end of the day, shut it off. I personally find that, going out running, I've got 2 dogs, I take them running with me, always makes me feel better. It allows me to clear my head. Even if I'm still thinking about work a little bit, it lets me hit that reset button just a little bit. And if I don't do that, if I just, especially now that I'm personally in a work from home situation, so, I'm always in a work environment basically, it can really wear on you if you let yourself get trapped into thinking about work all of the time. So find other things to make sure that you're not getting stuck in that idea of, I know I've got to do this tomorrow and I got to do that the day after, and then next week we're going into this. Find some time for yourself.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to try to answer some of our remaining questions in one sentence, and then give our panelists 30 seconds to kind of give their last thoughts as we're getting close to the end of our official time. And as I said, for those who might have joined late, we are going to hang around a little bit after our hour is up, so you can keep asking questions. We understand that there's a lot of stuff happening with NAMM this week, so you might have something else you're going to. So I want to mention that. The number one thing that I would tell a person getting into this industry is that you are a service and not a commodity, and do not train your clients to treat you like a commodity. What I mean is, don't allow them to think, oh, I'm going to pay you $10 an hour. I bet you I can get someone to do it for $9. You might be able to, but is it the same service? You are providing a service as an individual. The quality of that service is what allows you to charge more. Yes, one of the questions asked was, are we concerned about brain drain? Because we're seeing a lot of people leave our industry either because they were close to retirement or because they had to get a legit job, I did air quotes that you couldn't see, to pay the bills, and they're not coming back. And are we concerned about that? Absolutely. But there's also going to be an opportunity for a new generation of people to get involved in this business and for them to have opportunities to proceed. And related to when that happens, no one has a crystal ball. Are we optimistic that it's this fall? I can tell you unofficially that there are some very large companies that produce some very large events that are hoping that a summer season of festivals and success with those will lead to indoor events in the fall. Now, whether or not we can get there is a different question. So let's go around the horn. Let's start with Lenny.
So I've really enjoyed being on this panel. Thank you so much. This has been very educational for me as a high school teacher. And I guess the one thing that I want to go away with is approaching this panel. It was difficult to think about which direction to go. Do I talk about people who want to become theater educators, or do I talk about how to take advantage of your theater education? And so what I would say is that if you are a student of theater or technical theater, talk to your professor, talk to your teacher about the connections that they have, because they might not even realize that they know people that can give you some advice, can help you. And also, right now, that because there are a lot of people out of work, there are so many free seminars happening all the time. Get on Instagram, get on Twitter, follow people that do things that mimic what you want to do, and see what they post about, because they're sharing things from the industry where people are talking about these things all the time. And while you are not able to get that hands-on experience, learning elements of design and some of those more creative skills are things that you can still do. So
Take it, Kevin.
Okay,
I didn't
great.
mute you, but
yeah, I'll say two quick things that are basically an answer to what do you want people to know when they're entering the industry. One is, it's okay to not have a plan. I will often tell people that, I'm nearly 40. I make a good living mixing Hamilton. I did in the non-pandemic times, at least. Like I found a career as a theatrical mixer. I didn't know that mixing was a thing until I was about 30. So, someone asked me, what's your 5-year plan when I was 22? I had no idea. So it's okay to not have a plan. And the second is, as you're progressing in your career, look around you and make sure you're elevating people around you, because they're going to help you in the future. Make sure especially you're elevating the people around you and behind you in their career that are from different backgrounds than you, who don't look like you and who don't think like you and who don't have the same resources as you. So do your part to diversify the world around you.
Awesome. How about you, Molly?
Definitely what Kevin said. If you nail yourself down to a solid path, you may miss a lot of very interesting opportunities. Something we haven't touched on and isn't necessarily the subject of this, but I'll just plug this: take care of your body. The stretching even the very mild stretching I did in my 20s, I think prevented a lot of injury. Remember that we all know each other, and that's a good resource. Also remember that if you burn a bridge, burn it on purpose, because it will be remembered. But everybody kind of knows each other, and that's a really great resource of information and things that you can find out. If you have questions about pay rates, situations, venues, find a good time to ask a question, and don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be unsafe. But if you're wrong, learn from it and move on. Take the note.
Mike?
What I would say for anyone getting started in the industry is good advice for any point in your career is always put yourself in a room where there's more oxygen than you can possibly breathe in. Surround yourself with people who know a lot more than you do about different things. Get that exposure to different corners of the industry and related industries. Always be on the lookout for how you can extract information from these different people. And the moment that you feel like you're in a position where you're not growing and you're not getting a lot of exposure to be able to keep learning and growing, that's a good opportunity then to move on and find a new position somewhere else or a new team to work with, because if you find yourself in that position where 6 months, 12 months, 18 months go by and you feel like you're doing the same thing day in, day out, then you have to ask yourself how many years can you do that, and how many years can you do that where each year you're sort of stunting what your overall career growth is going to be over your lifetime.
All right, Mr. Devious One, David, how about you?
My thing has always been to find your community, and whether you know exactly what that is or not, there are a lot of people who have developed their careers by asking questions on ControlBooth, by finding out, and it's community is a really good way to surround yourself with smart people. So don't be afraid to reach out, to ask that first question, to hop on, make a comment, and no matter where it is, ControlBooth, somewhere else, Facebook groups, find a place that you feel comfortable, and find a place where you'll be challenged. That is that's really important. It's why we're all here doing this today. Is that we believe in the idea of paying it forward and helping out the next generation, and all we ask is that as you do that, you start to model that in your own life and career, because this industry is far smaller than you think it is, with vastly more opportunities than you realize. Everybody knows everybody, and that's a good thing. So that's what I've got.
Excellent. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank our attendees for taking time to watch us talk. We appreciate the support. I want to thank each of the panelists for taking time out of their schedules. Some of them are, hanging around waiting to get back to work. Some of them are trying to figure out how they're working in a new virtual model. And some of us are just, watching TV all the time like me. So this concludes our official discussion, but we're going to have an after discussion. It's going to be an afterglow where we're going to maybe talk about some other questions that came in that are a little further off the beaten path. But feel free to stick around, ask some more questions on YouTube. We'll chit chat for a little bit and see what we come up with. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Gonna just throw this up for a minute. Okay. I think we've definitely got a couple more questions.
Yep.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Peter said this has been the best thing in the show so far. Oh, makes it happy. We prepped pretty hard for this, and really appreciate that.
So one of the questions that I'll pose to everyone that came in, there were some good questions. A lot of our questions were about the influence of the pandemic on the industry, which is certainly important questions. One of them was, with all of the companies doing virtual presentations, is there a concern, or what is the feeling that is that going to be the new norm, or how challenging is it going to be for us to get back to live events? My own personal answer is I don't think it's going to be that hard, because the one commonality of our industry is the shared experience. Me watching Hamilton on Disney Plus, as good as that is, and as much enjoyment as I can take out of it, that is not the same as going to a live show and having that shared experience with 100, 500, 5,000, 50,000 other fans and creating that shared experience.
I think as an educator, I see a great deal of enthusiasm amongst our young people. They are ready to get back on the stage. And I kind of have to constantly be the one to say, hold on, we have to wait. We're not physically in school right now. We're in virtual school. In the fall, we did a fully virtual production of Clue. And I pretty much just, my students and I watched YouTube videos of Twitch streamers basically teaching how to use it. So we did a live production of Clue online, and it was really, it ended up being a lot more fun than we expected. But overall, I don't see that, at least in my realm in the education world, becoming the new normal. However, I have to say, I am enjoying the pressure that this is putting on some of the licensing companies, because we are seeing more opportunities to broadcast our productions. And for amateur shows, educational shows, it was actually really nice. I got a lot of feedback from parents that said it was great. His grandparents could see it, even though they live in Utah or whatever. So having those opportunities in the future would be nice. I don't know if they will stick around. And obviously, I know that licensing is a big issue, but as long as we're talking about educational theater, I don't mind paying extra money to be able to send that video to family. But I didn't have the option until now. So that's been kind of interesting. And it's one thing that I kind of hope will stay. But as far as going back on the stage, the kids are ready.
I will say I've watched 4 or 5 live stream concerts that were put on. A couple of the 3 notable ones. TSO did I want to say it was pre-recorded, because there were 0 glitches and it came in at super high quality the entire time. But it was really nice. Carbon Leaf did like a like backyard thing. They did it at one of their members' houses, but it was great. It wasn't perfect quality, but it was just a lovely time. The best one though was the band AJR. They did a live stream out of Rock Lidditz, and the stage production value was jaw dropping. I mean, they brought a full stadium tour and did things that you were just mind blowing. They had a guy the main singer climb up on a ladder. He was on a harness, but at one point he jumped, and they had a laser beam come out right at that moment to create like a light bridge, and it was so perfectly done. And I'm assuming they used Tate winches on this because the precision was so perfect. But it looked like his feet landed on the light bridge as they took away the ladder, and it's jaw dropping. But one of the kind of the overall things about that is I loved the accessibility. I don't think I've paid more than $40 for a ticket. And the accessibility when you couldn't normally go to the show, because you've got little kids. I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and getting a babysitter during the pandemic is nigh impossible. But I got to, attend some great shows. And I really hope that these are successful enough that bands and tours will consider doing a broadcast either at the beginning or the end of a tour for everyone who wasn't able to actually get there in person. I do want to. I want to go back in person and see some more concerts. I love being there. I love that sense of shared experience. But there's certainly a number of concerts that I wouldn't spend, $200 for a ticket, but I'd certainly blow 30, 40 to go see them, and maybe that's at the end of the tour. So I see that there could be a lot of value in continuing a streaming model in one way, shape, or form, and I think it could be valuable. Um, Either almost as a test platform, we're gonna do this and get feedback from the audience before we take it on tour, staging it out of one of the big staging venues, Upstaging or Rock Lidditz, or one of the other major stages where you basically pre-prep your show and get it all ready before you take it out on tour. So I could either see that in the beginning, or I can see is waiting till after everybody's already bought a ticket to the to a live tour and actually going there in person, and then doing a virtual stream for everyone else. So I can see easily the justification for continuing with live streaming in some way. But I think everybody's eager to get back on the road. But I do hope that we continue now that we really have the institutional knowledge under our belts of how to pull this off. This is not a case of, voodoo. How do we do this? It's been done. And it's been done very well by a number of different companies. And they've invested a ton in equipment to pull this off. So I hope they're going to keep using the equipment.
And I think also one thing that people in the industry who, are making hiring decisions and education decisions need to know is that you're going to have a generation of theater kids who have learned a lot about video editing, live video editing, audio mixing, lighting for the camera, because that's the only way that we could create theater right now. And my students some of them are finding that this is what they really want to do, that they really enjoy it, and they might not have had that opportunity otherwise. So as a video editing nerd, I have really been appreciative of that. I'm ready to get back on the stage, but I love that the students are developing new skills. And so be on the lookout for some really awesome video editors, acquisition, all that. They're ready.
I mean, and at the other end of the thing, to be a little bit of a traditionalist, we've been doing performance for thousands of years. We have plays, dating back 3,000 years and more. We have songs and all this stuff. We've been doing this for a long time. So I think live performance will be back. And as they said, we have a whole new bag of tools to do stuff with now. So, just coming from opera and ballet, we now have people who said, I don't want to be in an audience, but I really want to see the show. And to be able to diversify, for companies to be able to diversify that revenue stream will be interesting to see how they can make use of that. But I definitely think a lot of audience members are looking forward to live performance as well.
There's also a very important part, which is what makes live performance unique is that experience, that shared experience that we talked about creating with the cast, with the performers and the audience is a singular event. That exact performance happens once and you got to experience it. Again, Hamilton on Disney Plus, it's the same thing every time you watch it, no matter how good it is. But you go to San Francisco or wherever that tour is going to next, and you get to see the show, and Kevin engineers it slightly differently because he's feeling different. He decides there's more.
A polite way of saying it, Kevin messes something up.
Or, I mean, how many times have you seen a performer, you know, the piece is a living piece of artwork. They embellish one thing, or the audience doesn't get one joke, so they know they're not going to get this other joke, but they'll probably get this joke, so they change the atmosphere and they tailor it to that experience. That's still going to be that unique aspect of live performance. And there's going to be middle ground, and economics is going to play into it. Can I sell a ticket on Broadway for $750 if the demand is not there because you can watch it at home? Someone will figure out the right way of doing it where they do both. I have no doubt about it. But there are a lot of opportunities as we move forward. But don't ever underestimate the desire for us as a species to want to get out of the dang house and to do something. Peter said his mother fell asleep during Hamilton in Toronto. It happens.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, it is exciting that the theater is becoming more accessible, and I am very appreciative that the conversations about licensing are coming up, because the longer I go as a theater educator, the more I see licensing is pretty much the number one thing that I deal with throughout the year. And there are specific limitations that you have to stay in. And I appreciate those because as an educator, I have students who someday might be the writers or the composers who are the ones who are earning money on licensed performances of things that they've created. So you want to be respectful and you want to teach that respect for that. But in the future, it would be really nice if we had some more options, especially in the educational theater world. I can understand a little bit more when it's for profit, but all of our ticket sales go back into whatever our next show is. And one of the difficulties for us in ticket sales for our fall show, we did a virtual show, was there's only one game in town as far as streaming for a lot of shows. So you purchase the license and then they only allow you to use their ticket sales and their broadcasting service. There's no negotiating out of it. So they take a cut of your ticket sales, you pay the licensing fee, and then by the time you broadcast the play and all of that, you're not making a whole lot of money. You're lucky to break even in that model. So figuring out a better way to do that in the future will be really important, because a lot of theaters are just putting up shows so that their students have something to do, so that the community has something to watch, but they are losing money right now because of the way that the industry is set up, and that's not acceptable and it's not sustainable. And so some of these predatory practices by the licensing companies need to be reined in. But every day, these licensing companies are being absorbed by one another until it's going to become one huge entity. So, but teaching students about copyright law is really important too. So I respect it. I always abide by the contract. But in the future, I think we need to have some conversations.
Question came in while we were discussing about online training. I've been heavily involved with a lot of training on the rigging side of the industry, which is one niche. But the question was, have any of you attended any really great online trainings that you would recommend they asked in the last month, but at all? I'd be curious to hear what the answer is.
I would say that definitely, at least on the audio side, there have been a lot of different trainings going on. if you look at what L-Acoustics is offering, D&B Audio Technic, Rational Acoustics released a whole bunch of stuff for their smart sound system tuning software. A lot of those platforms, part of learning how to play with the software or learning how to deploy the speakers is learning how to design a full sound system, or learning how to tune a sound system or optimize it. And there's a lot of they may be talking about one specific series of speakers, but there's a lot of related stuff that gets weaved into that, or woven into that, and you could basically get an entire all of the smart training. When I did that several years ago, it was like a 4-day class that you had to travel across the country to go to. Now it's all up on YouTube, and for like some fairly small amount of money, you can take a test and get a certificate. But the amount of expertise that those guys have that they can share with you and is now basically out there on YouTube is phenomenal.
Yeah, Mike covered the ones that I did. The Rational Acoustics one were especially great, and I'm about to take OSHA 10, which is I don't know if it's going to be great or not. Hopefully it'll be great.
I'll ask the question.
Bring caffeine.
Are you taking it via an entertainment-based resource?
Yeah, it was organized through this is a good resource for anyone actually to look at if you're a member of IATSE. The IATSE has a the training trust fund, so it's organized through the TTF.
Yep. So they use a couple of different places depending on where you are and online, but a great resource for OSHA 10 and 30 is a company called Lanky and Limey, which has also been heavily involved with the Event Safety Alliance in the past and do a really nice job. But there are OSHA 10 and 30 programs out there that are starting to, basically OSHA says, you have 94% of the content you must cover is this. And they give you, and it's literally less than 10% of the content is up to the instructor. So these groups are trying to take that little bit and tailor it to our industry. So for instance, trenching is taught in OSHA 30. I don't know about you, but except for the outdoor gig where I tried to bury the snake so it doesn't get trampled on, I'm not doing trenching. Leading edge, maybe the front edge of a stage or a platform, that's good. Silica training, not very helpful unless you're doing installation work. So they try to make it more effective because the idea is, listen, if you're going to take OSHA training, either general industry or construction, and it's to hit a checkbox, then what good is it really? Because you're not going to pay attention. So that's definitely a good recommended one. And OSHA 30 is actually a 5-day class because you can only be instructed for 7.5 hours at a time. So just keep that in mind.
Can you post a link to that company?
Huh?
Can you post a link to that company in the chat?
Oh, sure. But then I got to Google it.
By the way, this topic of training resources tends to come up fairly often. I know there have been several threads on ControlBooth where the lot of us have put together a list of 15 or 20 different things that are out there. Even before getting into COVID, there was a fair amount of stuff out there if you knew where to look. And since COVID, manufacturers especially have been just pushing out all kinds of content. I know ETC had a bunch of stuff that they were opening up. I don't know, they had an internal website you could log into that was available for free for a while. I don't know if that's still open, but there just are so many opportunities out there. And again, that's one of those things. If you have a specific interest in something, but you're not sure what the landscape is, just feel free to ask.
Yeah, and also here for the NAMM Believe in Music Week, I was just looking at my schedule for the next 2 days, and there's a bunch of great sessions. There's a bunch of electrical sessions with with ETCP trainers, and there's some rigging sessions I'm looking at on my schedule. There's some fun sound stuff. Like there's a ton of great sessions just in the next 2 days on the Believe in Music Week schedule. So check it out. They're great. And they did Dante level 1 and 2 certification classes on Monday and Tuesday, which might be available for replay. Otherwise, those classes are also available from other places for free from Audinate and such. That's a good audio resource.
Is it wrong when I hear audio, people bring up Dante, the first thing I hear is, I'm not even supposed to be here today?
No, not wrong.
No.
Yeah.
This is kind of a shifting gears a little bit, but something I want to make sure that we hit on is I personally feel like, the real launch pad for my career path and trajectory came out of internships. And
that's tomorrow.
Fine then.
Yes, that's a teaser for tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
Tomorrow
okay.
at 4.
Tomorrow
we'll have another talk with a larger focus on internships and the ways you can actually move through your career.
Giving you a hard time, Mike. So I'll ask a question.
For those of you who can't do internships, there's still a lot of work out there. For those of us who didn't have that opportunity.
Some people brought up the question about liability insurance and being a freelancer. I will tell you this: if you want to not be an employee of a company, for whatever reason you decide that is the last thing you want to do, I would recommend you form an LLC in your state. And when you do that, you elect it. I'm going to give you some very broad strokes, nothing specific. If you form an LLC, the IRS does not actually recognize the structure of an LLC federally in terms of tax implications. It's a state thing. But when you form your LLC and you get an EIN from the federal government, you can elect to be taxed as what is known as, people assume it's a small corp, an S corp. It's actually because it's section S of the tax code, but you can be taxed as an S corp, which then makes you what is known as an employer owner or an owner employee. So what they say is you have to pay yourself a salary, a reasonable salary, whatever that is, they don't say, but here's why you would do that. You make $40,000 a year. You pay yourself $30,000. So you're paying taxes through a payroll service. So it alleviates some of the stress of how much do I owe in taxes. But as a self-employed individual, you pay both halves of what is known as FICA. So your Social Security, Medicare, all that stuff. You pay your roughly 7.5% for you and 7.5% as the employer. So you're paying 15% on that money. But if you form an S corp, you can take withdrawals or disbursements from the LLC, from the corporation, that are not wages. So you don't pay that 15% tax on them. And I'm not giving you any legal advice. Certainly check with an accountant or a CPA or a lawyer in your local area, but there are some benefits to it. So maybe next year I'll get a lawyer together with me and we'll do a session about forming a small business. But there are some opportunities that if you really want to be self-employed, there are some good ideas to kind of make it worth it. The LLC thing, most accountants will say, if you think you're going to make more than $30,000 a year off your side business, that it's a good thing to do.
And especially if you're working, you know, a lot of people will try to find side gigs that have to do with childcare and things like that. Camps, always make sure that you check with the people that you're working for, even if it's the school district or sometimes school booster organizations run these camps. Find out what the situation is with their liability insurance, if you do not carry your own, or even if you do, because working with kids adds a whole other level to it that a lot of times gets complicated. So, especially if you're in a childcare or a camp setting, make sure that you're fully aware of what they offer or don't offer.
Mm.
You're all right. Wow.
Oh, just checking.
Guess we hit a plateau.
Okay.
I started talking about school and everybody's sleepy now.
I think we've covered everything, and other stuff has been in the chats, although there was a lot of support for your proposed session in the future, Ethan.
Nice. I'll mention for those of you who are not members of the Control Booth community, ControlBooth.com, sign up. There's a pinned thread for new members to just introduce themselves. And then when you do that, you will also be able to join the Discord channel. And that tends to be that's more chatty, to say, where, you know, if we're bored and we just want to blow steam, we talk, and there's some different channels in there. But it has been a great resource. And the reason why I tend to promote it is, it's one way for me as a professional to give to those getting into the industry, but also asking questions to other professionals. And I've formed some really good friendships with people, made some good network connections. I mean, I wouldn't have met Kevin besides, you know, YouTube, had it not been for Control Booth, or actually any of the people on the panel, really. So yes, quite chatty, both Discord and Control Booth. Yep. And I would be remiss if I didn't do this. You'll have to post about this later, David. But if you don't join Control Booth, then you will never know the beautiful person that is our Canadian friend, Mr. Ron, and his almost mythical career in and outside of the entertainment business. Ron is one of our members who I don't think there's much he hasn't done. And he's funny as heck.
There are a number of great people, and we have some really awesome resources. We have so many manufacturers and on the site. I could call out ETC, Chauvet, Pathway, Doug Fleener Designs. But a lot of them monitor the site. If there's a question, they're going to hop on, and if some of the community hasn't gotten to it, or they have a more recent, you know, firmware update, they'll pop on and answer. You can get really, really good industry help very, very quickly. So that's one of our benefits, is we've amassed so many people in the industry. I can't tell you of a better place to get a more authoritative answer on DMX questions for a variety of reasons. But if there's something in the industry that you need to know, there's probably somebody there who can answer it. And if not, we'll grab one of the people that we know and convince them to come on and answer the question, because that's what we do. It's a community where we do our best to answer questions safely and accurately, and provide a community that understands what you want to do, that understands this wild and crazy industry, and that's what we're here for. So we're really glad to share this session with you today. Want to thank our sponsors, Entertainment Rigging Solutions, Production Advantage, powered by Vincent Lighting Systems. And I want to thank the panelists for all their time and dedication and all their expertise and willing to share. So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, everyone.